Uvaženi gledalci, dobroveče na kanalu Atlas televizije i pratite Atlas VIP. Večeras naš gost poseban, usudit ću se da kažem, počasni član Atlantskog savjeta u Washingtonu, Stefano Stefanini. Sir, good evening and welcome. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you very much.
So, what brings you to Montenegro? I know that this isn't your first time in our country, right?
It's not. I just came through Montenegro a very long time ago, but I have good memories of that trip.
And now?
And now,
how does our country differ from the time when you visited it?
The first impression I've had this morning, waking up and looking at Podgorica, was a very nice, modern, and sort of clean-looking city. It's good to be here.
It's good to hear that.
Yeah.
Of course, we have several reasons for bringing you to Atlas TV. It's 2014, at the end of January, and all those social issues are in the focus of our citizens. This may be important year in terms of our foreign policy. Do you expect that Montenegro gets an invitation for membership into NATO in September? Because right now we cannot hear as optimistic tones as we could, for an example, half a year ago.
That will depend as much on Montenegro getting into NATO as well as getting into the EU. Takes a lot of work, homework, and there is, from what I understand, I'm not at NATO anymore, there is some homework that Montenegro still has to do. It will depend as well on the whether or not this is what at NATO used to be called an enlargement summit. It may well be that for a number of general reasons that would have very little to do with Montenegro and more with that context, NATO decides not to invite new members this particular summit. So I think at this point in time, whether or not Montenegro will be invited is still an open issue. But it is, I think is not as important to be for Montenegro to be invited in 2014 as it is important to remain on the road to NATO and EU integration.
But it is mentioned as one of the strategic goals of this country and the government. Do you think it would be failure if we do not get an invitation into United Kingdom on the summit?
Into NATO?
Yes.
You said into United Kingdom?
No, I refer to summit, which is going to be held in the Wales.
Sorry. Okay. I don't think you should look at it as a failure. As a failure only if it would be clear that NATO, that Montenegro is not ready to enter NATO. That would be a shortcoming. Otherwise, if as I said, for reasons that have little to do with Montenegro and have more to do with the context, NATO decided is not going to extend an invitation at this summit. That's nothing to do with the government or with Montenegro. It simply is a postponement. I was what we call in jargon Paul Mill political military counselor in Washington in the 90s at the time of the first enlargement. And both Romania and Slovenia were candidates at the time. And Italy was supporting both of them. So we pushed very much for the first post-Cold War enlargement to include also Slovenia and Romania. We didn't succeed. But the conditions were there for both countries to become members, and they became members later. So
but when you mention homeworks that needs to be done, what do you refer to?
There are always a number of military legislation and administration reforms that are required both for NATO and for the EU. Obviously,
for an example, can you give us a concrete example?
For example, and I'm not familiar with the details of the Montenegro situation. So because I'm not in NATO anymore, one of the most important rules, if you wish, to be a NATO member is civilian control over the military. And very often new countries have to make legislation and administration reforms to make it happen. Transparency of police, military, intelligence service, all things that take time and, as I said, homework. And you know, this is why to become a member takes a lot of commitment by the candidate country. It's not just a matter of political will, but also actual work and a certain political will and consensus within the country.
And about public support?
Public support is obviously fundamental because in the end we're all democracies, so we could not be NATO or EU members if we don't have the popular support. But it is also important that political leadership and the political class makes the case. Consensus is also a matter of leadership and explaining why you want to be a NATO member. People have a right to know what are the costs and what are the benefits of any foreign policy choice.
Talking about NATO in Montenegro without mentioning NATO intervention in 1999 isn't possible. Do you believe that Montenegrins may overcome what happened 15 years ago because the opponents of our membership in the NATO use it as the strongest argument in a discussion regarding this issue?
There are many answers to this. My first one is simply that 1999 was a war, and after a war, it is not difficult when we talk about regular war, not civil war, to heal the wounds. Italy became a founding NATO members in 1949. That was 5 years after the end of the Second World War, and we joined the countries that had fought and defeated us. This is my first answer. The second answer is simply, are the Balkans a better place now than they were in 1999? And I think the answer is yes. So in that respect, NATO intervention, which was certainly painful, it was painful for Serbia, it was painful for Montenegro, it was painful for Bosnia, was eventually beneficial to the region.
To the region.
And to Montenegro today.
Our neighbors, Croatia and Albania, for example, are already member states of the alliance.
Exactly.
We often talk here in Montenegro about advantages and disadvantages of the membership in the NATO, but nobody can tell how much would Montenegro have to spend on an annual basis for that membership. Recently, we have heard that the amount might be €500,000.
I mean, it is very possible. I mean, I don't have the figures. When I mean,
nobody feels comfortable talking about the price.
The tag price of NATO membership is not very high because in absolute terms, NATO does not have an army. There's not national armed forces are part of NATO, so you don't have to spend for. But there are common military, common and civilian structures you have to pay for. So probably €500,000. Put it this way, €500,000 a year sounds like a right amount. But I have no data, I have no information.
Hopefully we will find out
Before
we decide.
I am sure you will find out.
So NATO's essential and enduring purpose is to safeguard freedom and security of all its member states.
Yes.
Using measures, political and military means.
Exactly. It is what we say, a political military alliance.
Politically military alliance. Okay. What may this imply in case Montenegro joins it?
Sorry?
What may this imply in case our country joins
in
NATO?
Terms for Montenegro?
For Montenegro.
Well, we're not now in a sort of Cold War mindset. At the time of the Cold War, every piece of land was a zero-sum game. It was either ours or theirs or neutral. This is not the case anymore. But the threats that all our countries are facing now are not so much territorial. I don't think Montenegro feels threatened by any territorial invasion, nor Italy does for that matter. But there are a number of other threats we're dealing with. Terrorism, what is called cyber, energy security, which are affecting small, medium and big countries to the same extent. Size matters, size resources matter in terms of contribution, but matters less in terms of the significance that is to be member of an alliance. So I think in terms of for Montenegro to be member of NATO and the European Union it offers an identity. You become member of an exclusive club, and that matters. Say to when you say Italy, for instance, Italy is a EU and a NATO country. That makes it sound safe for foreigners, for investors, for instance, because it guarantees stability to some extent. In terms of thinking about Italian political stability has its own ways, but it guarantees security, rule of law, and a number of things which you just get by saying NATO and EU country.
So we would have both economic and political advantages from the membership in the NATO?
I think so.
Because although we are not yet a member state, we have investors here from Italy, from the United States, Germany, etc. Although we are not.
Well, of course, but first of all, there is a competition, a global competition for having foreign investment. Italy is certainly interested in having foreign investment. In that respect, to be the guarantees you can offer to a foreign investor are greater if you are in NATO and the EU than otherwise. And it is also, how could I say, I think in that respect, Italians and Montenegrins, we can understand each other quite well. It is also a matter of identity. A country like Montenegro or Italy, how do we define ourselves? Are you Italians a European or a Mediterranean countries? Obviously, we both. And is Montenegro a Balkan or a Mediterranean country? And obviously, you both. But we, by becoming EU, we sort of reassert our identity. And this is, in a global world, this is extremely important.
But what do you find as the most challenging issue in the Balkans? Do you believe that frontiers are definite, at least for some time now?
I think the Balkans in general have found the way into being into becoming European mainstream. We've had a century, more than a century, which has been largely dominated, marked by Balkan wars. In a way, even the First World War started as a Balkan war, started with the assassination in Sarajevo. In the Balkans, you've tried everything. You've tried supremacy, every time to be the greatest in the region. You've tried unification, you've tried separation.
How successful were those intentions?
The intentions every time were good, at least, but none has worked. I think the best option for the Balkans is what you find now, is integration in a greater European and Euro-Atlantic identity, association, which then allows each one of you, like Italy, to maintain and strengthen, if you wish, our own national identity. So you can be stronger keeping your diversity.
What is the simplest way to explain to our citizens? For example, my uncle and aunt are in Nikšić and they are watching this interview. They're over 60.
Hello.
Over 60. Hello.
Well,
Okay.
I'm over 60 as well.
Okay.
So
how would you...
we belong to the same generation.
Okay. Yet your country is a member state of NATO, theirs isn't.
Yes.
How would you explain in simple words why does the NATO need Montenegro? Because they will tell you, Montenegro, 600,000 people living here and a military of 200 soldiers. What is the easiest way to explain an average Montenegrin citizen that NATO needs Montenegro?
NATO does not need Montenegro, or NATO does not need Albania, or NATO offers Montenegro an opportunity, and of course NATO benefits of each member. Don't forget that one of the founding members of NATO as being Iceland. And Iceland has no army, has no armed force, does not have a Minister of Defense. And I said in my nearly 4 years at NATO, I said next, because we go by alphabetical order, so Italy is in between Iceland, and on my left was Latvia. It was small countries. Well, when the Icelandic ambassador took the floor, everybody listened. NATO is really an exercise of strength in diversity. You can be small, but you still give your contribution. Take an example, Estonia. Estonia is small, but Estonia is built host what is called a Center of Excellence in cyber, because cyber warfare being one of the biggest threats. Now, Estonia has found its niche in specializing in that area. Montenegro has a crucial position in the Adriatic. The Adriatic is an essential part of Europe, and Montenegro can become a hub for many, for the strengthening of the integration of the Balkans into NATO and into the EU. So Montenegro has a lot to offer to NATO. You must not feel the small country inferiority complex.
Thank you. Uvaženi gledalci, slijedi blok EPP-a, potom se vraćamo u studiju. Uvaženi gledalci, pratite Atlas VIP. Podsjećamo, naš gost je počasni član Atlantskog savjeta Stefano Stefanini. Sir, according to Stratfor Global Intelligence, the top trends that will shape this year are an enduring dichotomy between Iran and the United States, the rise of nationalists and extremist party In Europe, Russia and Germany bargain over Central Eastern European and energy policy, China's return to strongman politics, and domestic turmoil and economic stress in India and Turkey. In which way can we expect our country and the region to be influenced by these trends, since we have a growing presence of the United States, Germany, Turkey, and some Middle East countries in this region?
I like Stratfor. I'm a regular reader of Stratfor, and I read about these global trends. I think they're not, in a way, they're not exhaustive. Let me make an example. And this is the prospect of a different relationship between Iran and the United States is something that Stratfor has been focusing on for at least a year, if not longer. And I do agree that that will change very much the dynamics. If it happens to the extent it happens, will change very much the dynamics in the Middle East. But this is, I don't think, is the only dynamic affecting the Middle East. I think we should keep an eye on what is happening in Egypt. I think there is a penetration of terrorist movement of Al-Qaeda in Northern Africa and spreading what I've called Al-Qaeda's pivot to Africa. And of course there is the Syrian civil and proxy war.
We have talks ongoing in Geneva regarding Syria.
Exactly. So it is not the Iran-US component is one of the main components, but it's not the only one. And obviously, and I'm a bit skeptical about Germany sitting down with, in 2014, and discussing with Russia strategically the energy issues. I think 2014 will see the development of the energy revolution, which we've been witnessing in the last couple of years. But no, it is not simply a Germany or Europe, if you wish, a Germany-Russian discussion. Well, of course, all these trends will affect Montenegro. All they will affect Italy. I think we have to get used to the idea that we live in a global or interdependent world. Probably I like better interdependent, but global is more catchy and shorter. So, you can be big as the US or the EU or China, medium like Italy or
small like
UK,
Montenegro.
or small like Montenegro or Luxembourg, if there is, or Iceland. And what happens in the world will affect you because there are no islands. You cannot build barriers. But also what you make in your small size will affect others. That's the game of interdependence. It's not only that you cannot shelter from what happens outside, but what happens in your small domestic environment has a much wider effect than you expect.
A long-term effects?
Long and wider. Say, you're interviewing me, if you or I say something completely obnoxious and out of the book, this is going to be broadcast everywhere. Even if it is, we're talking in a sort of small environment for a relatively small audience in Montenegro. But if we stray out of what is normal, our effect will be much wider.
Churchill has a long time ago said that the history of any alliance is the history of mutual recrimination. Yugoslavia has ended in bloody recrimination, and now I don't compare, but I can say we witness growing Euroscepticism within the EU.
I know, possibly.
What makes the NATO and the European Union sustainable?
Okay. Well, I don't know if Churchill was talking about double in tennis when players recriminate with each other until they win. Because if you win, all is forgotten, or some is forgotten. I think NATO and the EU pay to some extent the price of success. And then, in this respect, regarding to the sort of inner skepticism, they are in a different league. First of all, Euroscepticism exists within the EU, not outside the EU. Don't tell me that people in Kiev streets are Eurosceptic.
They obviously aren't.
They
on
obviously
contrary.
aren't.
On contrary.
Okay. There are still people who are ready to sacrifice themselves for the European or the NATO ideal. Europe, the EU, I think needs to be more citizen-friendly. The image that Europe has been cast in the last few years as being too demanding and too bureaucratic. Also, you forget the success stories. The EU has even received the Nobel Peace Prize for enlargement and for stabilizing large Central Eastern Europe, and now it's all forgotten. Just imagine what would be Central and Eastern Europe and the Balkans without NATO and the EU. NATO is in a different situation. The problem with NATO is more of complacency. There is in NATO, in European countries, in NATO members, there is not a threat perception. We feel safe. I think the perception is wrong. You only have to look at what is happening on the southern shore of the Mediterranean to realize that, especially countries like Italy and Montenegro is not very far. Montenegro is the Mediterranean country as well, that we're not safe. And NATO is still the best guarantee of our security.
For some time now, we witness new kind of relations between Europe and the United States. I refer to WikiLeaks and Snowden affairs. European lawmakers said that decades of mutual trust between Europe and the United States have been breached by Washington's spying activities. How and when this trust can be regained? If I remember correctly, the former Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi felt the reach of US surveillance in 2001 while he was in Jerusalem.
I'm not sure about Romano Prodi, but
that's what media reported.
It's obviously quite possible, given the reach of the NSA surveillance as being disclosed by Snowden. The issue that I think that the issue that Snowden brought to the fore is much wider than the relationship between the US and its allies. It's the issue of national security versus the right to privacy. And eventually this is a problem that Americans first have to solve for themselves, to what extent you can go to protect your national security.
They have started the reform of the NSA.
They have started the reform of the NSA. You have also to go back to the mindset after September 11, when then there was really a feeling that had the surveillance be better, the tragedy of September 11 could have been avoided.
Yet it doesn't make Europeans less irritated.
It doesn't make Europeans less. I think it's very much up to the Americans now to assure that their will to not to spy to allies, not to extend the surveillance beyond the strict need of security. It's a very gray line. The strength of America, the strength of American democracy has never been in not making mistakes. America, like all of us, has made many mistakes. America can be big and strong. Its mistakes might be bigger and stronger. But America has an incredible capacity to correct its own mistake. And let me add one thing. One of, regarding, going back to NATO, one of the places where there's been less discussion about, less repercussion about Snowden as being a NATO, because within NATO at least, we don't spy each other. We share intelligence among ourselves. That creates a feeling of mutual confidence.
Sir, is there anything else you would like to say and that we haven't mentioned in this part of the interview and which is crucial for our viewers to know from your perspective?
Okay, I would like to go back to your uncle and auntie, simply because they belong to my generation, and tell them, by personal example and life story, if you wish. My father was in the Second World War. He was
my grandfather as well
was a POW, and obviously we were in different camps, I guess. My father was a POW, prisoner of war, in India for nearly 5 years, more than 5 years, because his submarine was sunk by the British, actually by an Australian ship in September 1940 in front of Alexandria. My wife is Australian.
I wanted you to tell that. I know why you were laughing.
And when I actually met in my first posting in Australia someone who had been on the ship that had sunk my father's submarine. He had become a rear admiral in that time, but he was midshipman at the time. But I remember a photo that was given to my father by the Minister of Defense, the British Minister of Defense, and it said to Gustavo Stefanini, that was my father's name, for a better association that in September 1940. And this is what NATO does to you. It heals wounds. And so I really hope next time I visit Montenegro to visit, you're already in, with one foot in NATO. You've been a NATO partner for a long time. But I hope next time I come here to visit the 29, maybe, NATO member country.
When do you expect to return to Montenegro and then?
Soon enough.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You're very welcome.
Uvaženi gledalci, bio je ovo Stefano Stefanini, počasni član Atlantskog savjeta u Vašingtonu. Hvala vam na pažnji. Naravno, ostanite uz program Atlas televizije. Do gledanja.